The blizzard hit so fast that Beatrice Newman didn't even have time to curse her own foolishness before the world turned white around her, the wind screaming like a living thing trying to tear her from the saddle. She had been riding toward Laredo, Texas for 3 days now, her last few coins clutched in her coat pocket, hoping to find work as a seamstress or laundress or anything that would keep her fed through the winter of 1882. Her horse stumbled beneath her, and she knew with terrible certainty that if they didn't find shelter soon, they would both die out here in this merciless storm. Through the wall of snow, she caught a glimpse of something dark, a structure. She urged her mare forward with the last of her strength, her fingers so numb she could barely feel the reins. The building materialized like a miracle, a large stable standing alone on the prairie, solid and real. She practically fell from her horse, her legs giving out as soon as her feet touched the ground. With shaking hands, she managed to pull the stable door open just enough to lead her mare inside before collapsing against the doorframe, pushing it shut against the howling wind. The darkness inside was absolute at first, but gradually her eyes adjusted. She could make out the shapes of stalls, hay scattered on the floor, the warm presence of other horses stirring in the sudden intrusion. The smell of animals and hay and leather wrapped around her like a blanket. She led her mare to an empty stall, too exhausted to unsaddle her properly, just loosening the girth enough so the horse could breathe easier. Then she found a corner filled with hay, burrowed into it like a child, and let unconsciousness take her. She woke to voices. Male voices, speaking low and urgent just outside the stable door. "Storm is only getting worse. We need to check on the horses, make sure they have enough feed to last through this. Never seen anything like it this early in the season. December usually brings cold, but this is something else entirely." The door opened, letting in a blast of freezing air and swirling snow before slamming shut again. Beatrice pressed herself deeper into the hay, suddenly terrified. She was trespassing on someone's property. What if they threw her out into the storm? What if they thought she was a thief? "Well, I'll be damned," one of the voices said, closer now. "Kyle, come look at this." Beatrice closed her eyes as if that might make her invisible. She heard footsteps approaching, felt someone crouch down beside her hiding place. "Miss." The voice was gentler now, concerned. "Miss, are you all right?" She opened her eyes and found herself looking into the face of a man who appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair damp from snow and eyes the color of good whiskey. He was studying her with an expression somewhere between worry and wonder. "I am sorry," she managed, her voice hoarse. "I did not mean to trespass. The storm, it came so fast and I could not see anything, and this was the only shelter I could find. Please, I will leave as soon as it is safe to do so." "Leave?" The man sat back on his heels, then called over his shoulder. "Thomas, bring some blankets from the house. And tell Maria we need hot coffee and food." "No, please," Beatrice protested, trying to sit up. The world spun dangerously and she had to brace herself against the wooden wall of the stall. "I do not want to be any trouble. I just need to rest for a moment and then I will be on my way." "On your way where?" The man had moved to examine her horse, running his hands expertly along the mare's legs, checking her over with practiced ease. "This animal is half frozen and exhausted. You would not make it 100 yards in this storm. Neither of you would." The other man, Thomas, appeared with an armful of wool blankets. He was older, probably in his 50s, with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Miss, you look about ready to shake yourself to pieces. Let us at least warm you up before you make any decisions about leaving." Kyle Ramsey, as she would soon learn his name, wrapped one of the blankets around her shoulders himself, his movements careful and respectful. "Thomas is right. This is no weather for pride. My name is Kyle Ramsey. This is my ranch about 15 miles outside of Laredo. You are welcome to shelter here until the storm passes. Beatrice Newman, she said through chattering teeth. I truly am sorry for the intrusion. I was traveling to Laredo to find work when the storm caught me. Well, Miss Newman, you picked a good stable to find. We will take care of your horse, and you need to get up to the house where it is warm. Can you walk? She tried to stand, and her legs buckled immediately. Kyle caught her before she hit the ground, his arms strong and steady around her. For a moment she was too embarrassed to speak, too aware of how close she was to this stranger, but then the cold and exhaustion overwhelmed everything else. Thomas, I am going to carry her to the house. Can you see to her mare? Make sure she has feed and water, rub her down good. Already on it, boss. Before Beatrice could protest, Kyle had lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, cradling her against his chest. He wrapped the blanket more securely around her and then pushed back out into the storm. The house was closer than she expected, but the journey still felt endless, the wind tearing at them, snow stinging any exposed skin. She could feel Kyle's heart beating steadily beneath her cheek where it rested against his coat. He smelled like leather and wood smoke and something else, something clean and masculine that made her feel strangely safe despite the chaos of the storm around them. Then they were through a door, into blessed warmth and light. A woman's voice called out in Spanish, rapid and concerned. Kyle answered in the same language, his accent flawless, before switching back to English. Maria, this is Miss Beatrice Newman. She took shelter in the stable during the storm. She needs to get warm and have something hot to drink. Maria turned out to be a stout woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes and capable hands. She took one look at Beatrice and began issuing orders that Kyle obeyed without question. Soon Beatrice found herself seated in a chair near a roaring fireplace, multiple blankets wrapped around her, with a cup of hot coffee pressed into her hands. Drink slowly, Maria instructed in English tinged with a Spanish accent. Small sips. Your body needs time to warm up properly. Beatrice did as she was told, feeling sensation gradually return to her fingers and toes, accompanied by painful tingling. Kyle had disappeared, but she could hear him moving around in another room, the sound of doors opening and closing, wood being added to what must be another fireplace. The room she was in was clearly the main living area of the ranch house. It was simply furnished but comfortable, with handmade furniture that showed good craftsmanship, colorful rugs on the wooden floor, and shelves lined with books. A clock on the mantel showed it was past 4 in the afternoon, though the storm made it seem like evening. Kyle returned wearing dry clothes, his hair still damp but no longer dripping. He poured himself a cup of coffee and settled into a chair across from her, studying her with those amber eyes that seemed to see too much. Better, he asked. She nodded. Much. Thank you for everything. I do not know what I would have done if I had not found your stable. You would have died, he said bluntly. This is one of the worst storms I have seen in my 10 years running this ranch. The temperature has already dropped below freezing and it is still falling. This is going to last at least 2 or 3 days, maybe more. The reality of what he was saying sank in slowly. 2 or 3 days, at minimum. You are stuck here, Miss Newman. I hope that does not cause you too much distress. No, I just feel terrible about imposing on your hospitality for so long. It is not an imposition. In fact, he paused, seemed to choose his words carefully. I am glad you found the stable, glad you are safe. There was something in his voice, an intensity that made her look up and meet his eyes. What she saw there made her breath catch. He was looking at her the way a man looks at something precious, something he had thought lost and miraculously found. You are staring, she said quietly. "I apologize. It is just that we do not get many visitors out here, especially not in the middle of a blizzard. And certainly not visitors as striking as yourself." She felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "You are very forward, Mr. Ramsey." "Kyle, please. And yes, I suppose I am. Life out here teaches you not to waste time on things that matter. The truth is the truth, whether I speak it or not." Maria appeared with bowls of rich beef stew and fresh bread, saving Beatrice from having to respond. The food was delicious, and she realized she had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. She tried to eat slowly to maintain some semblance of manners, but she was so hungry that she cleaned her bowl in minutes. "More?" Maria asked with a knowing smile. "I should not." "You should," Kyle said firmly. "You need to regain your strength. Please do not be shy. We have plenty." She accepted a second bowl, this time managing to eat at a more dignified pace. As she ate, Kyle told her about the ranch. He raised cattle and horses, employed a small crew of ranch hands who mostly lived in the bunkhouse about 100 yards from the main house. Thomas was his foreman and had been with him since Kyle bought the property 6 years ago. Maria was Thomas's wife, and they lived in a small cottage on the property, though Maria spent most of her time at the main house, cooking and keeping things in order. "I moved here from Kansas," Kyle explained. "I worked cattle drives for years, saved every penny I could. When I had enough, I came to Texas looking for land. Found this place and knew it was meant to be mine. It must be a lot of work running a ranch on your own." "It is, but I love it. The freedom of it, the challenge. Every day is different. Every season brings something new, though I could do without storms like this one." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the wind screamed against the windows with renewed fury. Beatrice shivered despite the warmth of the room. "You are safe here," Kyle said quietly. "I promise you that. This house has weathered many storms, and it will weather this one too." "I believe you." And strangely, she did. There was something about Kyle Ramsey that inspired trust. Maybe it was the steady way he looked at her, or the calm competence with which he moved through his home, or the obvious respect Maria and Thomas showed him. Whatever it was, Beatrice felt safer than she had in months. Maria showed her to a guest room after dinner, a small but comfortable space with a real bed covered in thick quilts. Someone, probably Maria, had laid out a clean nightgown on the bed. "It was mine when I was younger," Maria said, seeing Beatrice's questioning look. "Before I had children and gained weight, it should fit you well enough." "You are very kind, all of you." "Kyle is a good man," Maria said, something knowing in her eyes. "The best man I have ever worked for. He has been alone too long, I think. Perhaps God sent this storm for a reason." Before Beatrice could ask what she meant, Maria had wished her good night and closed the door. Beatrice changed into the nightgown, which did indeed fit reasonably well, and climbed into the bed. The mattress was soft, the blankets warm, and she could hear the storm raging outside, but she felt cocooned and protected. As she drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was of amber eyes and a quiet voice promising her safety. She woke to pale gray light filtering through the window and the continued howl of wind. The storm had not abated. If anything, it sounded worse than the night before. She found her clothes had been washed and dried, laid out neatly on a chair near the fireplace in her room. Someone must have come in while she slept. The kindness of these people overwhelmed her. When she emerged from the room, she found Kyle sitting at a large wooden table in what served as both kitchen and dining room, papers spread out before him, a cup of coffee steaming at his elbow. He looked up when she entered and smiled, the expression transforming his whole face. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. Better than I have in weeks, months perhaps. Thank you again for your hospitality. Coffee, please." He poured her a cup from the pot on the stove, added a splash of milk without asking, and handed it to her. She took a sip and discovered he had somehow known exactly how she liked it. "Lucky guess," he said, seeing her surprise. "You seem like someone who likes a little softness to cut the bitter." "You are very perceptive." "I spend a lot of time with animals. You learn to read small signs, notice little things. It is not that different with people." Maria arrived shortly after with fresh eggs and bacon, and they ate together at the table. The meal was companionable, easy in a way that surprised Beatrice. She had expected to feel uncomfortable, trapped in a stranger's home by forces beyond her control, but instead she felt almost peaceful. "Tell me about yourself," Kyle said when they had finished eating. "What brings you to Texas in the middle of winter?" She hesitated, then decided he deserved honesty. "I am running away, I suppose. My father died last spring. He was a school teacher in Missouri. We were never wealthy, but we were comfortable enough. When he passed, I discovered he had debts I knew nothing about. The bank took our house. I had no other family, no prospects. I heard Texas was growing, that there were opportunities here for people willing to work hard. So I sold what little I had left and started traveling." "I am sorry about your father." "Thank you. He was a good man. He taught me to read and write, gave me an education most women do not get. I can keep books, do figures. I thought perhaps I could find work as a governess or teacher." "Can you really keep books?" Kyle leaned forward, interest sharp in his eyes. "Yes, my father believed in practical education. He taught me mathematics, accounting, even some basic law. Why? Because I despise paperwork. Always have. I can run cattle, break horses, mend fences, birth calves, but sitting down with ledgers and accounts makes me want to put a gun to my head. Thomas is the same way. We muddle through, but I know we are not doing it well. Are you offering me work? I might be. But let us get through this storm first. Let us see how we all get along. Maybe by the time the weather clears, we can come to some arrangement that benefits us both." It was more than she could have hoped for. A chance at employment, a place to stay, at least for a while. She tried not to let her desperation show too clearly, but she must have failed because Kyle reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You do not have to worry anymore, Beatrice. You have landed in a good place. I can see you have been carrying fear for a long time. You can set it down now." His hand was warm and calloused, strong from years of hard work. She looked at where their hands joined and felt something shift inside her chest, some tight knot of anxiety beginning to loosen. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." But he did not move his hand, and she did not pull hers away. They sat like that for a long moment, connected across the table, while the storm raged outside and warmth surrounded them. The day passed slowly, as days do when you are trapped indoors by weather. Kyle showed her his office, a small room off the main living area, where his disaster of paperwork was evident. Ledgers lay open with half-finished entries. Receipts were stuffed into drawers with no organization, and his records of cattle sales and expenses were nearly indecipherable. "This is not so bad," she lied kindly. He laughed, a rich, warm sound. "You are a terrible liar. It is a complete mess and we both know it, but if you think you can make sense of it, I would be grateful. And I would pay you fairly. Room and board plus wages. You would have your own space, your independence, but also security. You have known me for less than a day. How do you know you can trust me? The same way I know horses. Instinct. Observation. You have honest eyes, Beatrice Newman. And you are desperate enough to need the work but proud enough not to take advantage. That is the kind of person I can trust." "You barely know me," she protested. "Then let me know you better. Talk to me. Tell me things. We have time." And so she did. As the storm continued its assault on the world outside, They sat in his warm house and talked. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her father's love of books and learning, about the small schoolhouse where he had taught for 20 years. She told him about her mother who had died when Beatrice was 12, and how her father had never quite recovered from the loss. She talked about her journey to Texas, the fear and uncertainty, the nights spent in cheap boarding houses or camping under the stars, always moving forward because there was nothing behind her worth going back to. In turn, Kyle told her about his own past. He had grown up in Kansas, the youngest of 4 brothers. His father had been a farmer, but Kyle had always been drawn to animals, especially horses. At 17, he hired on with his first cattle drive and discovered he loved the freedom of the open range, the challenge of the work, the camaraderie of the men he rode with. He spent 10 years working drives, eventually becoming a trail boss, respected and well paid. But he had always dreamed of having his own place, being his own boss, building something that would last. "I am 29 now," he said. "Old enough to know what I want, young enough to still build it. This ranch is everything to me, but it is lonely sometimes. A house this big and just me rattling around in it. You never married, never found the right woman. Came close once back in Kansas, but she wanted a town life, a husband who worked in a bank or a store. She did not want the uncertainty of ranching, the hard work, the isolation. I could not give up the dream and she could not share it, so we parted ways. Do you regret it? No. I regret that we were not right for each other, but I do not regret the choice I made. This life suits me. I just wish I had someone to share it with." He was looking at her as he said it, and the meaning in his eyes was clear. Beatrice felt her heart begin to race. This was happening too fast. She had known this man for barely a day. It was madness to feel this pull toward him, this sense of recognition, as if her soul had been searching for his without knowing it. "Kyle," she began, but she did not know how to finish the sentence. "Too forward again," he smiled, but there was vulnerability in it. "Tell me to stop and I will. But I believe in honesty, Beatrice. Life is too short and too uncertain for games. I look at you and I see someone I could care about, someone I already am starting to care about. If that frightens you, I understand. But I wanted you to know." "It does frighten me," she admitted. "But not in the way you might think. It frightens me because I feel it too. This connection. But we are strangers. This is your home and I am only here because of a storm. How can we trust what we feel when the circumstances are so unusual?" Maybe the circumstances are unusual because this is meant to be unusual, meant to be special. I do not believe in much, Beatrice, but I believe things happen for a reason. You could have died in that storm. Instead, you found my stable. You found me. That means something. The wind rattled the windows as if punctuating his words. Beatrice wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. "What are you saying?" "I am saying do not leave when the storm passes. I am saying stay. Work for me if you need the excuse, but stay because you want to. Stay because maybe this could be something. Maybe we could be something. Kyle, please." The word was raw, stripped of pretense. "Please do not leave." The sincerity in his voice broke through her defenses. She saw in his face the same loneliness she had been carrying, the same hope that maybe, finally, the searching could end, the same fear that this fragile possibility could shatter like ice under a careless step. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to understand what I am feeling. But I will not make any decisions until after the storm passes, until I can think clearly without fear or desperation clouding my judgment." "That is fair. That is more than fair. I am just asking you to give us a chance. That is all. You have it. You have my word." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand again. This time he raised it to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and it made her heart flutter in her chest. "Thank you," he said quietly. The storm continued for 3 more days. 3 days during which Beatrice and Kyle existed in a strange, suspended reality, removed from the normal world by the wall of white outside. They talked for hours, discovering shared loves of literature and music, debating philosophy and politics, laughing over silly things and falling silent over profound ones. They cooked together, with Maria teaching Beatrice family recipes while Kyle proved surprisingly capable in the kitchen. They played cards in the evening, and Kyle taught her to play chess, delighted when she proved a quick study. Thomas and Maria joined them for meals, and through them, Beatrice learned more about Kyle. She learned that he had saved Thomas's life during a particularly dangerous river crossing on a cattle drive, refusing to leave the older man behind when his horse went down in the current. She learned that he paid his workers better than most ranchers, treated them with respect, and had helped several of them become American citizens. She learned that he regularly gave cattle to struggling families, never expecting repayment, and that he had once ridden for 2 days straight to fetch a doctor for a sick child in Laredo. "He is too good for his own well-being sometimes," Maria said fondly. "He gives and gives until he has nothing left for himself. That is why his paperwork is such a disaster. He is too busy helping everyone else to take care of his own business. He needs someone to look after him," Thomas agreed. "Someone to make sure he looks after himself as well as he looks after others." They were not subtle, but Beatrice did not mind. In fact, their obvious approval of her, their clear hope that she would stay, made her feel welcomed in a way she had not felt since her father died. Like she might actually belong somewhere again. On the 3rd night of the storm, Kyle found her standing at the window, watching the snow fall. The fury had finally gone out of the wind, and now the flakes drifted down almost gently, beautiful and serene. "It is ending," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Yes." "Beatrice, dance with me," he blinked in surprise. "What? Dance with me, right now? There is no music, but I do not care. I want to dance with you." A slow smile spread across his face. He bowed formally, offering his hand. "It would be my honor." She placed her hand in his, and he drew her close, one arm around her waist, the other holding her hand against his chest. They swayed together, moving to a rhythm only they could hear. Beatrice rested her head against his shoulder and felt him press his cheek against her hair. "I am going to stay," she whispered. His arms tightened around her. "You mean it?" "I mean it. I want to stay. I want to see where this leads. I want to know you, Kyle Ramsey. I want to be known by you." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." "Thank you, God," he breathed, and then he was kissing her, gentle and reverent, like she was something precious beyond measure. She kissed him back, pouring into it all the hope and fear and longing that had been building inside her since the moment she woke to find him looking at her in the stable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you." "I know it is too soon to say such things, but it is the truth. I am falling in love with you, Beatrice Newman." "I am falling in love with you too," she admitted. "It is terrifying and wonderful and completely insane. The best things usually are." The storm broke the next morning. Beatrice woke to brilliant sunlight streaming through her window and a silence that felt almost eerie after days of constant wind. She dressed quickly and went to find Kyle. He was already outside, surveying the damage with Thomas. Snow lay in deep drifts everywhere, transforming the landscape into something alien and beautiful. "How bad is it?" she asked, joining them. Could have been worse, Thomas said. Lost some shingles off the barn roof, a few fence posts down. But the animals all came through fine and the buildings are solid. We got lucky, Kyle agreed. He looked at Beatrice and smiled. Very lucky. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The snow melted gradually, and Beatrice threw herself into organizing Kyle's office. She created a proper filing system, balanced his ledgers, and discovered he was actually more prosperous than he realized, having undercounted his assets and forgotten about several outstanding debts owed to him. She wrote letters on his behalf, collecting what he was owed, and organized his business affairs so that he could see at a glance where he stood financially. "You are a miracle worker," he declared one evening, reviewing her work. "I had no idea I was doing this well. All this time I have been struggling to make decisions because I thought I had less capital than I do. You have changed everything. It is just organization. You did the hard work of building a successful ranch. I am only making it visible." But she glowed under his praise, and he took every opportunity to show his appreciation. Sometimes that meant bringing her flowers he found blooming impossibly in a sheltered spot. Sometimes it meant stealing her away from work for walks across the property, showing her every corner of his land, sharing his dreams for what it could become. And sometimes it meant kissing her breathless in the stable or the office or anywhere else they found themselves alone. Their relationship deepened with each passing day. Kyle was respectful, never pushing her further than she wanted to go, but his desire for her was evident in every touch, every heated look. Beatrice found herself wanting more too, but she held back, some part of her needing to be sure this was real, this was lasting, before she gave herself completely. In late January, Kyle took her to Laredo. It was her first time seeing the town that had been her destination before the storm changed everything. It was smaller than she expected, rough around the edges in the way of frontier towns, but vibrant and growing. Kyle introduced her to merchants and ranchers, the sheriff and the banker, always with obvious pride. "This is Miss Beatrice Newman, my bookkeeper." And then, his hand at the small of her back, his voice warm with something more than professional respect, "and my very dear friend." The women of the town took her measure with sharp eyes, but most seemed to approve of her. Or perhaps they simply approved of Kyle finally showing interest in someone. It became clear that he was well respected in the community, known as honest and fair in his dealings. They stopped for lunch at a small restaurant, and over plates of tamales and beans, Kyle reached across the table and took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled but did not rise to the bait. "I have been thinking about us, about the future. Beatrice, we have known each other less than 2 months, which by any reasonable standard is far too soon for what I am about to say. But nothing about us has been reasonable from the start." Her heart began to pound. "Kyle, let me finish. Please, I love you. I am completely, thoroughly, desperately in love with you. You have brought light and laughter and order into my life. You have made my house a home. Every morning I wake up grateful that a storm drove you to my stable. Every night I fall asleep thanking God you stayed. I know I am not much. I am just a cowboy with a ranch and rough manners, but I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy if you will let me. Beatrice Newman, will you marry me?" She stared at him, tears blurring her vision. "You are wrong about one thing." His face fell. "What?" "You are not just anything, you are everything. You are kind and good and strong. You are patient and generous, and you make me feel safer than I have ever felt in my life. You are exactly what I want, exactly who I want." Hope flared in his eyes. "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes." "Yes, I will marry you, Kyle Ramsey. Yes to all of it." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her up and into his arms, kissing her in front of God and everyone in the restaurant. Someone started clapping, and soon the whole place erupted in applause and cheers. Kyle broke the kiss long enough to announce to the room, "She said yes," before kissing her again. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Laredo. Maria and Thomas stood with them, along with Kyle's ranch hands and half the town. Beatrice wore a simple white dress that Maria had helped her make, and Kyle wore his best suit, looking so handsome it made her breath catch. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Kyle kissed her with such tenderness that she felt tears slip down her cheeks. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn and food enough to feed an army. People danced and drank and celebrated late into the night. But eventually, Kyle found her alone for a moment, standing outside the barn looking up at the stars. "Happy?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind, deliriously, impossibly, completely. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, gold with a small diamond that caught the starlight. "I know we already did the ceremony, but I wanted to give you this properly. To make sure you know that I am yours, Beatrice, for as long as we both live." She held out her hand, trembling, and he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I have nothing to give you in return," she whispered. "You already gave me everything. You gave me yourself. That is all I will ever need." He led her away from the party, back to the house that was now their home. At the threshold he paused, then swept her up into his arms, carrying her across just as tradition dictated. Their room, the room that had been his and was now theirs, glowed with lamplight. Someone, probably Maria, had scattered flower petals on the bed and left a bottle of wine with 2 glasses. Kyle set her down gently, then cupped her face in his hands. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. We can wait. We have all the time in the world." "I do not want to wait. I want you. I want this." "I am only nervous because I have never been with anyone before. I do not know what to do." "Neither have I," he admitted, and at her look of surprise he smiled. "I wanted it to mean something. I wanted it to be with someone I loved." "I have been waiting for you, Beatrice, even before I knew you existed." She kissed him then, deeply, pouring all her love and trust into the connection between them. He responded with matching passion, but also with patience, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. When they finally came together, it was with tenderness and joy. 2 people discovering each other, learning what brought pleasure and comfort, moving together until they became one in the most intimate way possible. Afterward they lay tangled together, Beatrice's head on Kyle's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I love you," she said into the darkness. "I love you too. More than words can express. Thank you for finding me in the stable. Thank you for asking me to stay. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me, choosing this life." She tilted her head to look up at him. "I would choose you 1,000 times over, in any storm, in any circumstance. You are my home now, Kyle. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." He kissed the top of her head, holding her close. Outside the window, the Texas sky stretched endless and star-filled over the ranch that was now theirs together. And somewhere in the darkness, the stable stood quiet and solid, the place where everything had begun. Where a woman fleeing a storm had found refuge, and a cowboy had found his heart. The spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, grass grew green and lush after the winter snow, and Beatrice settled fully into her role as Kyle's wife and partner. She continued managing the books, but also took on other responsibilities, helping Maria with the cooking, tending a vegetable garden, even learning to ride better so she could accompany Kyle around the property. She discovered she loved ranch life more than she had anticipated. The hard work satisfied something in her soul, and the freedom of the open spaces made her feel more alive than she ever had in her old life back in Missouri. Most of all, she loved being married to Kyle. He was everything a husband should be, attentive and loving, treating her as an equal partner in all things. In May, she realized her monthly courses had not come. At first she tried not to hope, not wanting to be disappointed, but when another month passed she finally told Kyle her suspicion. His reaction was everything she could have wanted. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then set her down very carefully as if she might break. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. When are you feeling all right? Do you need to see a doctor? Should you be resting?" She laughed at his sudden panic. "I am fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, but yes, I would like to see a doctor to be sure. I think the baby will come in early December." "December," he breathed. "By next winter we will have a child, our child." The pregnancy progressed without complication. Beatrice felt well, if sometimes tired, and Kyle hovered over her like a mother hen. He insisted she not work too hard, brought her anything she might crave, and talked to her growing belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about the ranch and all the things they would do together. On a cold night in early December, almost exactly a year after she had found shelter in his stable, Beatrice woke Kyle with a hand on his shoulder. "It is time." He was out of bed instantly, pulling on clothes, his hands shaking with excitement and fear. They had made preparations, and the doctor from Lerdo was already staying in the guest room, having come the day before when Beatrice said she thought the baby would arrive soon. The labor was long and hard. By morning, Beatrice was exhausted, drenched in sweat, gripping Kyle's hand so hard she was sure she would break his fingers. But he never complained, never left her side, murmuring encouragement and love through every contraction. Finally, as the sun rose, flooding the room with golden light, their son entered the world. He came out squalling, red-faced and perfect, and the doctor placed him on Beatrice's chest while Kyle stared in wonder at the tiny life they had created. "We have a son," Kyle said, his voice choked with emotion. "Beatrice, we have a son." "What should we name him?" she asked, stroking the baby's downy head. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at the baby, Kyle said, "James, after your father." "James Ramsey, if that suits you." She burst into tears at his thoughtfulness. "That is perfect. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, little one." Kyle kissed her forehead, then very gently kissed his son's head. Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." Baby James proved to be a relatively easy child, at least once he got past the first few sleepless months. He was curious and active, always wanting to see everything, go everywhere. As he grew into a toddler, he followed Kyle around like a shadow, imitating everything his father did. Kyle was a devoted father, patient and playful, taking James with him on his rounds of the ranch as soon as the boy was old enough to sit a horse in front of him. 2 years later, Beatrice gave birth to a daughter they named Clara, after Kyle's mother. She had her father's amber eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was just as headstrong as both her parents combined. Where James was cautious and thoughtful, Clara was fearless and impulsive, keeping them constantly on their toes. The years passed in a blur of birthdays and holidays, cattle drives and harvest seasons, laughter and occasional tears. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Kyle's skill with animals and land combined with Beatrice's business acumen made them one of the most successful ranches in the area. They expanded their holdings, built a bigger barn, hired more hands. But they never forgot where they started, and Kyle still personally checked the old stable every night, making sure it was ready to shelter anyone who might need it. When James was 7 and Clara was 5, a particularly bad summer storm blew through one evening. Lightning split the sky and rain came down in sheets. Kyle and Beatrice were sitting on the porch after putting the children to bed, watching the storm, when they saw a figure struggling up the road toward the house. Kyle was off the porch in an instant, Beatrice right behind him. They found a young man, maybe 19 or 20, drenched and exhausted, leading a limping horse. "Please," he gasped. "Is there somewhere I can shelter? My horse threw a shoe and started limping." The storm came up so fast. Kyle and Beatrice looked at each other and smiled. "Of course," Kyle said. "Come on. Let us get you and your horse taken care of." They led him to the stable, that same solid building that had sheltered Beatrice 8 years before. As Kyle helped the young man tend to his horse, Beatrice brought blankets and hot coffee from the house. "You can stay until the storm passes," she said, "and rest as long as you need tomorrow. We know what it is like to be caught in a storm far from home." The young man looked between them, confused by their obvious amusement. "Have I said something funny?" "No," Kyle assured him. "We are just remembering another storm, another traveler who found shelter here. That worked out pretty well for us." He slipped his arm around Beatrice's waist and she leaned into him, both of them remembering. The young man clearly thought they were strange, but he was too grateful for the shelter to question it further. Later, back in their own bed, the storm raging outside while their children slept safely down the hall, Beatrice turned to Kyle. "You ever think about that first night? When you found me in the stable, all the time, best night of my life even though I did not know it then. What made you say it? Why did you ask me not to leave?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I saw something in you, a spark, a light. I felt like I had been searching for something all my life without knowing what it was, and suddenly there you were, shivering in my stable, and I knew. I knew you were what I had been searching for. I could not let you go without at least trying, without at least asking. The thought of you walking away, of never knowing what we could have been, was unbearable. I am glad you asked. I am glad I stayed. So am I. Every single day I am grateful you stayed. Please do not leave," she quoted softly, remembering. "Never," he promised and kissed her. Outside, the storm continued its fury, but inside they were safe and warm, surrounded by the life they had built together. The ranch prospered, their children grew, and their love deepened with each passing year. When James was 15, he told his parents he wanted to be a rancher like his father. Kyle taught him everything he knew, patient with mistakes, encouraging with successes. They worked side by side, and Beatrice watched them with pride, seeing so much of Kyle in their son's steady competence and kindness. Clara, at 13, announced she wanted to be a doctor. It was an unusual ambition for a girl, but Kyle and Beatrice supported her completely. They hired tutors to supplement her education and began saving money to send her to medical school back east when she was old enough. "Our daughter, the doctor," Kyle said one night, shaking his head in wonder. "My mother would have loved that. She would have loved both of them," Beatrice assured him, "just as she would have been proud of you, of everything you have built." More years passed. James fell in love with a girl from Laredo, the daughter of the town doctor, and married her when he was 22. Kyle deeded him a portion of the ranch, and James built his own house on the property, starting his own family while still working alongside his father. Clara, true to her word, went to medical school in Philadelphia, one of only 3 women in her class. It was hard having her so far away, but she wrote regularly, and when she graduated at the top of her class, Kyle and Beatrice made the long journey east to see her receive her degree. "I am so proud of you," Beatrice told her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "I learned from the best," Clara replied. "You taught me that women can do anything if they are willing to work hard enough. You built a life on your own terms. I am just following your example." Clara eventually returned to Texas, opening a practice in Laredo. She married a lawyer she met through her work, a quiet, intelligent man who adored her strength and independence. They had 2 daughters, and Clara balanced her practice with motherhood, proving it could be done. Kyle and Beatrice grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces lined with the marks of years spent outdoors and years spent laughing. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management, though Kyle still rode out most days, unwilling to fully retire. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Kyle surprised Beatrice with a party inviting friends from all over the county. As they danced together, just as they had that first night during the storm, Beatrice thought about how far they had come. "What are you thinking about?" Kyle asked, his arms still strong around her despite his 54 years. "I am thinking about how one storm changed everything. How one decision to stay when I could have left led to all of this. Our children, our grandchildren, this life we built. It all came from that one moment." "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. But then again, maybe the timing was perfect. Maybe we both needed to become who we were meant to be before we could find each other." "When did you get so philosophical?" "I have always been this way. You just bring it out of me." She laughed and kissed him, not caring that they were the center of attention, that everyone was watching. After 25 years, they had long since stopped caring what anyone thought. They loved each other, completely and without reservation, and that was all that mattered. They danced until late, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating not just their anniversary but the life they had created together. A life that had started in a stable during the worst winter storm, when a desperate woman found shelter and a lonely cowboy found love. Years continued to roll by like a gentle river. Kyle's hair turned completely white, and he finally hung up his spurs, content to advise James while spending his days with Beatrice, tending the garden and playing with grandchildren. They had 7 grandchildren in total, all healthy and happy, all carrying forward the legacy of hard work and love that Kyle and Beatrice had established. On a spring evening when Kyle was 63 and Beatrice was 60, they sat together on the porch swing they had installed years before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Their eldest grandchild, James's son, was working in the corral, breaking a young horse with the same patient skill his grandfather had taught him. "We did well, did we not?" Kyle said quietly. "We did very well. I love you, Beatrice Ramsey. I have loved you since the moment I found you in my stable. I will love you until I take my last breath and beyond. I love you too. You are the best decision I ever made, the best thing that ever happened to me." He took her hand, the same way he had 1,000 times before, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set on another day, another year, another season of their life together. Kyle lived to be 78 years old, sharp-minded and generally healthy until the end. He passed peacefully in his sleep, with Beatrice beside him in the bed they had shared for 46 years. The entire county came to his funeral, and person after person stood to speak of his kindness, his integrity, his generosity. But the most moving eulogy came from Beatrice herself, who stood before the assembled crowd and spoke with a steady voice despite her grief. "Kyle Ramsey was the best man I have ever known. He was kind without being weak, strong without being cruel. He treated everyone with respect and dignity. He built a legacy that will continue for generations. But more than any of that, he loved me. He loved me perfectly and completely for 46 years. He gave me a home when I had none. He gave me purpose when I was lost. He gave me children and grandchildren and a life beyond my wildest dreams. And he asked only one thing in return. That first night when he found me in his stable, he asked me not to leave. I stayed, and it was the best decision of my life. Kyle, my darling, I will love you forever. Thank you for everything. There was not a dry eye in the church. Beatrice lived another 12 years after Kyle's death, surrounded by family, still sharp and active well into her 80s. She spent her days helping with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, tending her garden, and keeping the books for the ranch that now belonged to James and his sons. She never remarried, never even considered it. She had found her great love, and one was enough for a lifetime. On a cold December night, exactly 57 years after she had first sheltered in Kyle's stable, Beatrice fell asleep in her chair by the fire and did not wake up. Her family found her in the morning, a peaceful smile on her face, and her hand resting over her heart where Kyle's ring still circled her finger. They buried her beside Kyle on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a spreading oak tree they had planted together 30 years before. The entire family gathered, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them products of the love that had begun in a storm. James, now an old man himself, stood at his mother's grave and told the story one more time. The story he had heard 100 times growing up. The story of how his mother had sheltered in a stable during the worst winter storm, and how his father had found her there and said, "Please do not leave." How she stayed, and how that decision changed everything, creating a legacy of love that continued through generations. "They were the best of us," James said to his own children and grandchildren. "Everything we have, everything we are, comes from the love they had for each other. Remember them. Remember their story. And remember that love, real love, is worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. It is worth everything." The family returned to the ranch house, that same sturdy building where it had all begun, now expanded and modified but still solid, still strong. In the stable, the same one where Beatrice had first found shelter, horses shifted in their stalls, warm and safe from the winter cold. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Kyle and Beatrice had built. And on winter nights, when storms rolled across the Texas prairie, the current residents always made sure the stable was ready, the doors unlocked, a lantern burning low, just in case someone needed shelter, just in case another story was waiting to begin. Because that was the true legacy of Kyle and Beatrice Ramsey. Not the land or the cattle or the prosperity, but the understanding that love can arrive unexpectedly, that home is not a place but a person, and that sometimes the greatest storms bring the greatest blessings. That a moment of kindness can change everything. That asking someone to stay can be the bravest thing you ever do. That saying yes can be the beginning of forever. Their love story lived on in the hearts of everyone who knew them, in the very foundation of the ranch itself, in the stable that still stood strong and sheltered, ready to begin the next chapter. And somewhere beyond the stars, Kyle and Beatrice were together again, dancing to music only they could hear, holding each other close, whispering the words they had said 1,000 times in life and would say forevermore in death. "I love you. I love you too. Thank you for staying. Thank you for asking me not to leave." And the story, their story, the story that began in a stable during a storm, the story of a cowboy and the woman he found and loved, reached its perfect, complete, and happy ending. Not because there was no more story to tell, but because the story had become so much bigger than just two people. It had become a legacy, a testament to what love can build when given the chance to grow. The ranch stood strong. The family continued. The love endured. And every winter, when storms rolled across Texas, someone would tell the story again, keeping it alive, making sure the newest generation understood where they came from, what they were built on, and why it mattered. Because in the end, that was all that really mattered. Love, family, home. And the courage to say stay when you find something worth keeping, and the courage to say yes when you find somewhere you belong. The story was complete. The circle was closed, and it was good.